Hey, welcome back. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast. We got a great show for you guys today. We're going to talk about the temperature in the locker room, how the players are relating to Dennis Allen, some of the stuff that Alvin Kamara talked about this week, the quarterback decision, of course. Can the Saints beat the Raiders? It's a huge game for them. We're going to get into that, some of the matchups with Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, and we're going to talk about so much more. I'm here today with Mike Triplett. DJ's on the ones and twos back there. And if you need help with any of the following, car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call Bado at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-777 for your free consultation and case review, badolaw.com. And as always, we are coming to you from the Bado Law podcast studio. And check out our friends on Veterans Boulevard, Firehouse Subs. They do great stuff for the community. Saw today that they donated a bunch of subs to help people that were fighting hunger. So when you spend money there, they're going to do stuff to help people out in the community. So make sure you check them out. If you're in the area, you're going to be doing your holiday shopping up by the mall. They're right by there. So check them out. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year, but we reloaded and now it is our boss year. A Debo back there, and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget my son, and don't forget the pass rush. Jameis QB1 dropping down to MT. Handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you at the Super Bowl party, eating on them double. We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing, and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Mike. We're going to talk about the Saints and where the season goes from here. Feels a little dark out there. In
Look at us wearing black.
We're dressed for
totally forgot they were playing the Raiders this week, too. I can't wardrobe change at this point.
Well, we don't got silver on, so I guess like we're just neutral. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the tone right now. People are a little bit down. The temperature of the Saints, I think, probably feels maybe the lowest since I started covering the team ever.
I mean, there are parallels to 14, 15, 16. And funny enough, we'll get into this. I was talking to some veteran players in the locker room kind of off to the side today, trying to talk about the stuff we're talking about and get, the real. And it is different than 14. 14 was the darkest because 14 was a year that actually turned. Like players gave up on coaches, players fought with each other, players pointed fingers at each other. We're not there yet, but that team was winning more games than this team is. So it in that sense, it's probably the worst record they've had. And since I started covering the team in 2005, Sean Payton and Drew Brees arrived a year later. I haven't actually looked this up. This might be the worst record they've had since then.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference for me in 14 is that there was still Sean Payton and there was still Drew Brees. And that's not a shot at Dennis Allen or Andy Dalton. I mean, but those guys were proven. They had won a Super Bowl together. By that point, they were already on Hall of Fame paths. You knew that as bad as things got, as long as those two were there, nothing was that far away. Granted, it took 3 years to really kind of turn it around, but you just kind of knew, like, if Sean buys in and he doesn't leave, things are going to turn around. Drew can keep them in games. You're never that far off when you have Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, and they don't have that right now until they prove it.
I'm going a little off script here, but and talking about us instead of the team for a second, I think both of us have been accused in the past of being glass half full. But there's a reason for that, because this team, in all the years we've covered this team, they've never been worse than 7-9. We were sort of proven right to be glass half full, and they came out of that and then won 4 straight division titles. But that's because we believed in Sean Payton, Drew Brees, the structure, Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas. There were a lot of things to believe in. So we would sit here and we would say, this feels temporary and we feel like they'll figure it out. I will openly admit I have less confidence in where this is heading than I've ever had before. Like, this doesn't feel like something that once they get over this hump, they'll get back to blank. I don't like what it looks like on the other side of this hump right now. So I think and I think the fans recognize that too, which is a reason why this is as dark as it's ever been.
Yeah, I'm uncertain definitely of where things are heading. We'll see if they figure things out. Like I said before, when you have Drew Brees or whoever, who are the comparisons now? Justin Herbert, like, it doesn't feel like the Chargers are that far off, even though they can't figure it out. You're looking at it and you're like, well, if they can do a couple things around him, they're going to be fine. Kansas City's
Well, the
always
Packers
gonna
are
be fine.
probably the best parallel. I wonder what they're saying in Green Bay, because they do still have a coach that has like won more games than any coach in his first 3 seasons ever, and obviously still have Aaron Rodgers. So I wonder what it would be like if we were on a Packers podcast, but we're not, because coach and quarterback are the 2 biggest short-term and long-term question marks for this team.
Yeah, and I think Aaron Rodgers is a little weird too. Like, so there's just stuff going on there that maybe might be different. He's pointing fingers at teammates in the front office. Like Drew was never a disruptive force. So
That's true.
So I think Rodgers kind of alienates people.
He was in one particular offseason.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but in general, he was never calling out his teammates. Like, if he was alienating people, it was in a non-football sense, and he definitely did alienate.
And Drew
people.
felt bad about alienating his teammates, and then tried to do everything he could to make up for it. To your point, Rodgers does not seem to mind alienating the rest of the team.
So I don't know though. I mean, it's hard to know where this thing's going. Even listening to Alvin this week talk about, well, Sean's not here, Nine's not here, we got to figure it out without him. I do think it's easier said than done. Now, I'm not at a point yet looking at their division and where they're at and everything. Like, really, if you start the season today, basically, I think whoever goes 500 in this division the rest of the way very well might win it. Tampa Bay looks bad. I'm going to be interested to see what Brady looks like in a month, when maybe some of the personal turmoil that he's going through is settled. Like, once he separates from that a little bit, does he look different? But he doesn't look like himself. Things look out of sync because of him. He's got a lot of stuff to figure out. This division's weird enough, though, that like, I think if you are a glass half full person, there are legitimate reasons to think. On the other hand, if you're glass half empty, if they lose this week, man, it feels like things could really, really start to just spiral in the wrong direction. And I don't know necessarily in the locker room, but tone wise, kind of where we're at, if you're on the team, hey, where are we at? Where are we going? Can we figure this out? I think with each loss, things are going to get a little bit more slippery.
The only hope that's sort of waiting for anybody that wants to be glass half full, and apparently the glass half full people don't follow me on Twitter because I haven't seen a glass half full take yet. But the only one is, what could this team look like when healthy? Could this be a team that could go 6-3 over the last 9, or whatever it is, 5-3 over the last 8, and could 8-9 win the division? So that's the only thing keeping this from being a must win, but it sure feels like a must win.
Oh, I think it's definitely a must win, just for all the reasons we're kind of talking about. And look, they're saying they're still in a good place and they're bought in, but I think that stuff's temporary. I think you can lose your locker room kind of quick, like not full scale 2014 people fighting naked in the middle of the locker room full scale, but like people just kind of starting to be like, you know what, let's just get through this season. I'm going to start going through the motions. I'm not going to do the extra. I'm just going to do me and kind of survive and get through it. And I think everybody's been in like a work environment where it's like they're showing up, they're still doing their job, but they aren't staying until 5:10 to finish something. They're 4:57. All right, well, I'm not going to start this next task. Like, I think you can end up in that kind of place kind of quickly. Yeah, and I think it's important that when
they have nothing to play for. I mean, the saying we could still win the division seems kind of silly, but luckily that's giving them a reason not to give up yet. But that could run out too.
If the Panthers find a way to win a game and the Saints win this week, they're in first.
Panthers
place.
Panthers play Falcons. Winner of that game will be in first place no matter what, right?
No, because the Saints have the tiebreaker over Atlanta. So, like, if the Panthers win, the Saints win, I think the Saints will be in first place. But yeah, I mean, tiebreaker. We're so far off from tiebreakers. But yeah, I mean, that's how close it is, and it's ridiculous because this season should be finished. Yeah. We should be
should already be checking out.
That Philadelphia situation, like, it should be, all right, what can they do to get a pick? Like, should they trade players? Should, what is the Sean thing actually going to manifest? Like, where does it go from here? That's where the season should be. And you're kind of looking like, all right, trade deadlines next week. If they win this game, should they add a running back? Should they try to do something to try to win the division? Is there any point to it? Where do you fall on it? Like, would you add? Would you sell? Would you stand pat? Like, where do you? This is going to be the real.
I have trouble adding.
This is
right
going to
now.
be the real. How much juice is in your cup?
Well, I think it. I honestly wouldn't buy or sell right now because of where they're at. Like, if anything, I'd lean more towards sell. If Tampa Bay was 5-2 right now and playing well, or 6-2 or whatever it would be, then we can get into whether we think there's any smoke at all to like internet rumors on Alvin Kamara being traded. But that is the kind of decision that this team would have to make if they were 4 games out of first right now at 2-5, because the future, like, there's a rebuilding waiting around this corner. We can go back and relitigate whether the Saints were right or wrong to sort of push all their chips in to try to win the season. I think what's happening in the NFC kind of proves they were right about what the NFC looked like and their chances to win the NFC South. And I didn't mind it. You didn't mind it, especially since we were talking about some moves. Like, they weren't major moves. They were, adding Tyrann Mathieu, adding Jarvis Landry, trading next year's first for this year's first, which looks like a disaster now. Because I thought, oh yeah, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, they should try to win while they still have those guys in their prime. But that goes away very quickly. I think once you say this season's done and we're not making the playoffs this season, I think rebuilding, replenishing draft picks has to be the top priority. Finding a quarterback. All those things have to be the next priority, not tweaking next year, really reloading next year. So I think that would be on the table right now. But the fact that in theory they could still win the division, the fact that we all think this team will be better in the second half of the year than they've been in the first half of the year, I'm not quite ready to sell Alvin Kamara or a major chip like that yet. But at the same time, I mean, unless somebody's given someone away, unless Kareem Hunt can be had for like a 5th or a 6th or something like that, I also don't really want to give up any future resources right now.
Let me just kind of walk people through a little helpful guide here. When you're on Twitter during this season, trade season, draft season, any season, football season, off season, and there's a rumor, and you look at it and you say, hey, I don't know if I've ever heard of this person. And then you go and click on their account and you say, I don't know if I ever heard of the place where they work. And then you go look at their mutual follows and they aren't followed by any reporter you've ever heard of. Odds are what they're telling you probably isn't true. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible for Alvin to get traded. It could happen. I'm never going to say never. I checked with every source that I know. Everybody said, hey, I haven't heard this. So I'm not sitting here writing up a story to be ready for with that possibility. But if they lose this game, or if Philadelphia or any other team calls and says, hey, we'll give you this, this, and this, and it's an offer where you're like, man, that's a really good offer. Maybe we should take it. Like, any of that stuff could happen. But right now, the stuff that's out there, it's not true. So if you don't know the person, you don't know where they work, and Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport or Tom Pelissero or Doug Kyde or whoever else you like that covers the national NFL, if they are not looking at this person's tweets, probably not true. And, it's just everything that's out there right now. I'm pretty confident saying is coming from BS sources. But again, you never know. Something could pop and something that somebody's guessing at. And a blue check don't even qualify anymore, because anyone can get a blue check.
We just saw the potentially division-leading Carolina Panthers trade Christian McCaffrey.
So there's a precedent.
So talking about Kamara is only relevant in that there's only about 4 or 5 guys that would be worth trading on the Saints roster to get something in return, and he should get everything that Christian McCaffrey got. But I hope I did not present that in any way like this is a realistic possibility that we're covering as though it's definitely
this is my therapy. I gotta get some frustrations off. Look, there's enough like crap out there right now with this team. Everybody's dealing with that. Like, the fake rumors are just it's frustrating to see. And I'm almost positive when Alvin tweeted the Michael Jackson popcorn image, like, he's laughing at it. Like, knowing Alvin, like, he knows what everybody says. He knows what people are saying on the internet. And he's just probably thinking, like, this is so dumb, but you know what? I'm gonna set the world on fire and laugh at him.
Let's talk about Alvin more, because he's actually a guy that I spent some time talking to. We all talked to him the other day in a group setting, and then I followed up with him to make sure we understood the meaning of everything he was saying. What's really interesting about Alvin is, and I think this is a big part of what he was saying. I know a lot of people thought it was some shots at DA, and in some ways you can take it as a shot at DA that Alvin feels a leadership void. But Alvin was making it very clear that he was talking about realizing that he needs to step up more because things that are sliding are things Drew used to. And he goes, if Chris Olave, he said Chris Olave jumped offside in practice. He said, if I don't yell at him for that, then I'm part of the problem. He said, of course coaches yell at us. And he said, but if Mark Ingram tells me I did something wrong, that means a lot more to me than a coach telling me I did something wrong. So Alvin made it clear that he didn't mean the coaches, and obviously Alvin had this big speech after the Arizona game that a lot of people said had a big impact. And just to let everyone know, that doesn't mean that DA came into the locker room and clapped and said, all right, everyone, good effort. We'll see you Monday. DA gave a speech. DA always gives a speech. Alvin felt like he also needed to give a speech. So we're going to dissect DA and whether he's doing a good enough job. But it was really interesting that Alvin has realized there's no Drew here anymore. Obviously, there hasn't been a Michael Thomas the last few weeks. There's a no Teron Armstead anymore. And I think Alvin was recognizing this team needs me to be this guy right now.
Look, there was a game in 2015 when Tony Hill's guy didn't play at all. He's on the team. They were losing at halftime. They came in the locker room at halftime, and Tony Hill said, no, I got this. And he gave this speech that like inspired everybody on the team, and they went out, they turned it around in the second half, they locked it and they won. And everybody on the team talked about how that speech brought them together and they won because of it. And I think it just goes to Alvin's point. Like if DA falls back, if Alvin's like, hold up, let me say something, and he says something and it's potent and you feel like the message resonated, coach can fall back. Like, I think that's when you have a good culture. So I think that's just, we're at a place though where when you're 2-5, every single thing is a piece of evidence of turmoil, and it's about to combust, and this new coach doesn't have whatever going on, and not everything is that. So Alvin speaking up and being like, all right, we have a leadership void. Someone has to step into this. You look around on that offense, like who else is it going to be? And who else are they going to hear more? Like, he is the pulse of this team. He is the person that I think everybody, when they come in, when Chris Olave comes in, oh, that's Alvin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like if Alvin's setting the culture, I think that's a good thing. And for him to speak up more, and if DA were, like, I'm sure DA spoke because he, like you said, he always spoke. But if he didn't and he fell back and said, all right, I'm going to let him do this, I think that would actually even have been a good call, because I think it's important for him to be that guy, not just be, all right, the guy that makes all these great plays. And Alvin used to kind of move silently and do his own thing. And if people followed him, they followed him. If they didn't, they didn't. Like, for him to understand that is important. But I do think this is good evidence of that void. Like, when you take Sean out of there, you take Drew out of there, there's going to be 5,000 different things that they used to do that maybe you didn't realize that they did, where people are going to have to step up and fill it different ways. They were that important. They were the team. They were the culture. They were everything. And for him to slide into that, I think is important. For him to speak the way he's speaking, that's all the evidence I need to know that the locker room is still intact, that he hasn't lost the locker room. Because I kind of feel like he's the most intelligent dude on the team also. Like, he just kind of, like, if he were out, I feel like that would be the bad sign. And he would be the first person maybe to give us signs of all right, things are messed up, because he's smart enough to know, if I say something here, people are going to hear it, and that's going to get my message across. He's not sending up any red flags right now.
Right. And look, DeMario's speech, which I wrote about in the fallout, I feel like if you just read it, it could come across as cliches. Oh, look, the veteran leader is saying we need more, you had to be in the room. Like it was so funny. It was Luke Johnson asked the question, DeMario, what about, the issue with missed tackles? This hasn't been a problem for the team. DeMario wasn't listening to the question. He did not address missed tackles. He gave a 5-minute answer that was part prepared speech, maybe had 30 seconds of prepared speech, and then just went into, and he, to use his word, preaching. Like, and it was kind of a, it was an intense speech that let you, I mean, the intensity is there, the fire is there with these guys. DeMario isn't checked out. Alvin certainly isn't checked out. Cam Jordan isn't checked out. And those things do happen. Those kind of guys can get checked out on teams that are going nowhere. So we're not there yet. That would be the biggest sign of concern. And I would actually say I like the way they've started every game since London. They came out like a house on fire against Seattle. They came out like a house on fire against Cincinnati. They came out like a house on fire against Arizona. The things that went wrong
The house burned down.
where this
Yeah.
team is not good enough. And so they haven't checked out yet, but like you said, that could be temporary. That's all at risk. But what's interesting to me is here's the biggest indictment, I think, of DA. I don't think he's incompetent. There's a lot of people who are ready to fire him and saying it's clear this guy's incompetent. I don't think they have a 31st ranked defense that is losing every game for them because DA doesn't know how to coach defense. 10 months ago, they had the best defense in the NFL down the stretch of last season. So I can't just completely say this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to coach run defense. He doesn't know how to coach missed tackling. He doesn't know how to coach preventing big plays. Like, it's going to take me forever to believe that. But there are some real things that I think he was the right choice, would have been the right choice for a team where everything was on the right trajectory and you wanted someone to keep it on the right trajectory. We've used Jim Caldwell taking over for Tony Dungy as an example of that working. George Seifert taking over for Bill Walsh. We didn't know if this team would stay on the right trajectory or not, and they clearly haven't. We knew there was a risk that they would fall off. They clearly have. And he might be in over his head. This team needs something different than keeping things on the right trajectory right now. I think one thing that you brought up and you recognized very early on, him and Pete Carmichael Jr. and Darren Rizzi and even Ryan Nielsen to an extent, and Chris Richard have always felt like kind of equals. I think they're probably being pretty deferential. I think they're missing and one person, say when, Sean Payton, even if he had a bad idea, it was like, this is what we're doing and you got to make me right, and it's like, now there might be a little bit more, well, we'll try your idea, we'll try my idea, that kind of stuff. I think those are the kind of things that make a coach like DA, if, even if he's not coming in here, if he was with a new team and he's like, this is how we do things under the DA regime, that probably has been missing from this team.
Look, I think the other thing too is like when something was wrong, you would see Sean and just kind of hear him and be like, these false starts keep up, someone's head's rolling, and like it would be an example, and then you feel that, and I think everybody felt that. I don't think DA does enough of that. I think there is a little bit of deferential treatment to Pete Carmichael, to where, well, this is a guy that I've ate lunch with every day for years, and I don't fear him, and DA probably kind of approaches him in the same level, like you just mentioned, and I think that there just needs to be a little bit of foot on the neck a little bit, and I think that's the thing DA has to figure out, and I think once he figures that out, because I do think Pete Carmichael is a good offensive coach. They got the second highest scoring offense in the NFC.
That side of the ball is improving.
Yeah, they don't have. They're switching between quarterbacks. There's injuries on that side of the ball, and they're still rolling. And look, some of that is due to being behind in games, and you're running, and of course, you're throwing against prevent defenses that are trying to stop you from having big plays, but they want you.
We could just talk about the first half, though.
Actually.
The biggest problem with the offense has been that they haven't been able to sustain in the second half what they've done in the first half. But give me the game plans and execution of the first half of each of the last 3 games on offense for sure. Well, first 28 minutes anyway.
Yeah, but to your point, I mean, look, there probably is an element of all right, how much at fault is DA for Alvin Kamara fumbling? Probably not very much. Right. I mean, Alvin's a very
intelligent and Alvin very specifically said, DA has not lost a fumble. DA has not thrown an interception. DA has not false started. And players say things like that. Now, obviously, a lot of times people will say that, but that's how the players that I've talked to feel in general right now. Yeah.
But also like if you're down Paulson Adebo, you're down Bradley Roby, you're down Marshawn Lattimore, you're down PJ Williams. If Chris Harris Jr. misses a tackle because he hasn't played football in X amount of months, it's kind of hard to blame DA for that. But when there is an epidemic of it, that is when you kind of start looking at them and say, all right, what are you doing to fix this? Like, I do think there is an element there of when there's just something that continually happens and happens and happens, whether it's on DA, whether it's on the coordinators, whether it's on the position coach, somebody is to blame at some point, and they got to get them on point. And that was one of the themes this week. And one of the reasons, and I'm going to regret saying this, like, I feel better about him after being around him this week, because coming out of this kind of long layoff, it felt like there was a little bit of introspection on the defensive side of the ball. And it was, kind of lockstep across the room. All right, guys have been doing too much. People are trying to be heroes.
Yeah,
You're trying
that
to
was
do
another
too,
big theme.
You're trying to do too much in the run game to cover up for, I think, the thing none of the players said, but the subtext was we're missing a lot of guys and there's people filling in, and maybe the talent level at different spots has changed. So I'm trying to help cover up for that, and I'm trying to help cover up for it. So now my run fits wrong because I'm trying to help this guy.
Yeah.
Like, they kind of realized some of the stuff that was going on that was causing this, taking a step back. All right, I'm just going to do what I do. And if something messed up happens over here, at least the whole thing doesn't blow up and fall apart. I kind of liked hearing that. The other thing too is Chris Richard said on the missed tackles, like, guys are pressing at this point. And now there's been so many missed tackles that they're going up to make a tackle and they're thinking, man, I better not screw this up. And then they screw it up. And it just kind of has become a snowball effect. So the fact that they found some cause and effect in this stuff means that they can maybe fix it. I'm not fully confident. Josh Jacobs might shred all this apart, and these good feelings are stupid in a couple days. But I like the fact that it seems like instead of being like, well, we're working on it, we're going to figure it out. They're like, all right, this is what was wrong, and this is how we fix it.
No, that's true. And that's another big theme that came up when I talked to people is they think the mistakes. I think we both agree that DA should have a what do you call it, a tougher hand or whatever. I know that's not the right word, but be stricter. I think that should have started way back in the offseason. I thought it should have been a stricter, more back to the basics. I don't care how we've done things. This is how we're going to do things now. I think that was the biggest misstep for the coaching staff. I think the offseason was a little too relaxed, kind of like they really tried to make it a continuation of Sean's not here, but everything else is the way it's always been. But
hold up, it was kind of like Sean's not here and we can do things a little bit.
that too. Yeah. But like there wasn't a sense of urgency like this season's going to fall apart if we don't take everything seriously. It was like, no, we're good. There was like a lot of no, we're good. And as everyone has pointed out, that was even how they treated the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the CJ Gardner-Johnson trade is we're going to be good. Don't worry. I know he's an important player, but we're going to be good. There was a lot of we're going to be good, which feels like it was the wrong message now. But a big thing that came when I was talking to players is if everybody wants more yelling, more screaming, more intensity, I actually feel like what's hurting this team more now is the pressing, the trying to do too much, the getting, like one player told me that their message is take a deep breath. All right. like stop treating what was Chris Richard's thing? He goes, if you think I'm worried I'm going to miss this tackle, what did you just tell yourself? Miss this tackle. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that is something that they feel like they've been trying to combat recently.
Yeah. All right. So going back to the original question before we went on this long tangent, you are not buying. You might sell, and you most likely stand pat.
I would only buy if we're talking day 3
Cam
draft
Akers
pick at worst. Maybe. My feeling on the running back position is well noted here. I don't feel like a third running back is solving this team's problems. I don't like the idea of giving up significant future resources. If anybody is available,
he's not significant resources though.
I don't think I'd give a 4th round pick for Cam Akers.
I would for a running. I think if you're talking about something like
Kareem
that,
Hunt,
if they win this game and you can add someone, look, I think Mark Ingram's been kind of struggling a little bit, and if you could bring someone in even to compete with him, push him, he's still going to be on the team next year and down the road from now. I think it would be a fine investment because not just this year.
That's true if they're going to be here beyond this year. For
not just this year, but next year. This is a run first team because they don't have a quarterback. They don't have a quarterback. You aren't fixing that.
True. If you're talking about also future value, then for sure.
Like this year, I would not trade for the 30+ running back and sign him to an extension. Like a younger guy that you could bring in.
Very true.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a huge need in the offseason without question. Yeah. It's a need now, but it's going to be an even bigger need in the offseason. I don't want to get we already in hindsight feel like this team put too many chips into this season. The last thing I want to do is like chase bad money with more,
So I would it's tough though, man, because like even if they win this game, like I don't look at them and I say they're a Super Bowl contender. Like I think if you got the right offer for the right player, I would still take it whether they win this game or not. Like what do you really
I don't know
what are you really chasing here?
I don't know who you can trade from this team that would bring value of any significance that doesn't just derail the team. I mean, the players that would bring
Well, that would be
value,
the point, though. You'd
right.
be saying this
You'd be
season
giving
isn't.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be trading Kamara. You'd be trading Marcus Davenport. Or you'd be trading. Geez, who
Davenport's the only one that
who
would
has
make
value?
sense.
Who has value?
I hate to
I'm
even.
not trading Marshawn. I'm not trading Ramczyk.
No.
I'm not trading. I mean, does somebody want DeMario? I'm not trading Cam. I don't know.
Would you trade? Oh man, I hate to ask you this.
Yeah.
Would you trade AK if you got your first round pick from Philadelphia back?
Oh, the one that would become a top 5 pick in the NFL draft if you traded AK and tanked this season. I mean, I love Alvin, but obviously I would. But they wouldn't offer that. They wouldn't offer that.
No,
I mean,
they wouldn't.
look what Christian McCaffrey just got. Not the number 5 pick in the draft.
I think that's like the only way I would probably give him up.
Well,
too.
would you do it for Philadelphia's actual pick, which could be 32nd?
No, I don't think so. I don't know.
That's about the value. I mean, that's about the value of probably what the McCaffrey deal was.
I think you still got like years of productivity, the cap hit for him. Because if you were trading Alvin, you would basically be saying, I'm buying this pick with cap space. That's kind of what you're doing, as well as giving up your very best player, the guy that if you pull him out of the locker room, everybody else is quitting on this season. You got a disaster. Your head coach is probably managing a sinking ship, and he hasn't had enough success to probably properly navigate that downfall without everybody in there quitting. So your season's derailed, your culture's screwed. If you're doing that, you got to be getting a pick that's absolutely worth it. And again, it's a major cap hit, so you're buying the it.
Well,
it would just really have to be.
Let's
pick
transition.
32. I don't know if I'd do it for that.
Let's transition into another topic I suggested. So I think I said to you, let's talk about what's best case scenario for this season. I think we have, like, it's they get together and they pull out a 8-9 wins the division. But if this team realizes at some point, whether it's 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now, that they're missing the playoffs this season, what is your approach to 2023? Is it tweak, or is it the full, like, actual rebuild that really doesn't exist in the NFL as much as people think? Blow it all up, quote unquote. But what does 2023 look like if this team misses the playoffs in 2022?
Yeah, like the blow it up thing, like they can't even, like there's so much dead money hit on a lot of this stuff that, like, if you blow it up, like, what are you actually doing?
Well,
like,
you're taking a year off and resetting the
but, like,
salary cap.
I think there's even a limit to how much they can blow up, because there's only so much cap space and you still have to pay all your players. So you can't just do it all at once. Like, it would have to be it would have to be a month.
Yeah, I mean, that's what blow it up would look like. Yeah, I mean,
but like there's some of these hits are so big, if you take the players off, like you're eating more than probably half your cap. If you just say, I'm getting rid of everybody at once and we're gonna play with the Marcus Fields like, across the board, like that would kind of be where you would end up with it.
So this is what I would say. This is how you could reset the cap. You could move on from, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I haven't made firm decisions. These are guys I would move on from, but the ones that would make the most sense: Andrews Pete, Michael Thomas. You'd consider maybe DeMario Davis. I don't think Cam Jordan or Alvin Kamara necessarily, unless you get trade value back for them, because I think they're part of the future. But no, I'm not getting rid of Marshawn Lattimore. I'm not getting rid of Ryan. I'm not getting rid of anyone who can start for me for 3+ more years.
Cam's not part of the future.
He's not part of the future, but I feel like he's a guy who's going to grow gracefully on this team. Like, remember what Kevin Williams was like late in his career? Like, I think Cam will start taking a reduction in salary and a reduction in snaps and be around here forever. So I'm talking about, obviously you don't re-sign Jarvis Landry. Maybe not on the rest of Tyrann Mathieu' contract. But what I'm saying is there's probably 5 or 6 guys that you don't pay anymore and 5 or 6 guys that you keep paying to be part of it. So it's not just DeMarcus Fields is across the board.
But what I'm talking, like, people on online think you get rid of everybody and it's just this, imploding of the team. No, it's like it's a gradual reduction strategically. Okay. There's X amount left.
But they've never even done that. They've never even done gradual reduction.
They did kind of in 15.
A little bit.
15 and 16. They tore down 14. 15 was like James Anderson started at middle linebacker. They definitely tore down a little bit. But you shed a little bit. Look, what I would do with this team is, I think as the season ended, I would get a feel for which quarterbacks are going to be available and if I can acquire one. And look, as much as there's this like free agency window and the trade window, like all that stuff, like people know well in advance exactly what they're gonna do. I think they kind of had a feel on what possibly could have happened with Aaron Rodgers last year with Russell Wilson. Like they were looking on all this stuff. Um, so I would find out. And I think if there was a realistic way to get one of these guys and you knew you could get them, I still look at this roster and I think that there's enough there. If you put in the quarterback, you could probably make a go at it. And the NFC is still going to be weird next year. And I would try to go for it and extend that window a little bit if I could, because at some point it is gonna this roster is just gonna age out and it's gonna blow up and you're gonna be at that point. But I think they're still close enough. Like right now, if you gave them, I don't know, a good quarterback,
Yeah.
like a top tier quarterback, like a legitimate franchise type quarterback, this is a team that's probably winning a decent amount of games. They're overcoming their defensive injuries with offense. They're going to get healthy. And then I think by December, they would have been probably peaking at the right point in a bad division. You get in the tournament and you see what happens. And I think they would have been good enough to have a shot. I think that can be true again next year, but
A decent quarterback and decent health. I mean, I think there's a push the reset button on the Nintendo machine version of this season where they're 4-3 right now.
Yeah,
you know?
barring that, yeah, I pare back a little bit.
Yeah.
I get rid of some of the guys. I'm realistic about where I'm at. I absorb some of the dead money. I kind of start to clean up my cap while still trying to remain a competitive team in a poor division. And that's probably like a 2-year process. I don't think there's ever going to be
more of their MO too.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a complete
Yeah.
bottoming out. Like we suck. There's nothing we can do. Like I think they're always going to try to remain competitive. And look, everything I heard pre Deshaun Watson was that was the approach they were going to take this year, that they were realistic about where their roster was at, that they were going to be conservative. And then something happened at some point where they were just like, you know what, let's go for it. And I think that was probably somewhat of the opportunity of, all right, well, Tyron's lingered out here a little bit. Jarvis Landry's lingered out here a little bit. You know, we've talked about it a million times, so we don't got to go over it again. I think the draft is where they made, in hindsight.
Obviously.
At the time, I liked it. At the
Obviously.
time, I liked it. In hindsight, though, that was, you know, they need to be more realistic about where they're
Well,
at.
here's
and
the
what they're
biggest
gonna
lesson
do.
we learned from that draft that we're never going to forget going forward. And we mentioned it, but we mentioned it in passing because we didn't see quite this implosion coming. And that's
Nobody could have.
I don't mind if you told me for a fact that the 2023 draft pick that they were giving up was the 18th pick, the same one they had this year, then I'm okay with
Sure.
it. And I think we all thought, well, if they get into the playoffs, it's the 24th pick. Trade that for the 18th pick here. That's fine. But it's just that risk that's attached, that little waiver that nobody reads at the bottom. By the way, if you guys are terrible this season and everyone gets hurt and it implodes, and this could be the 3rd pick in next year's draft. And like that was the waiver that none of us paid enough attention to. Never trade, especially when you're on the precipice like the Saints are right now. Like I remember when they had the Marcus Davenport deal, I remember like arguing with people like, that next year's first is so much. And they're like, well, it's only going to be the 32nd pick in the draft anyway. And it was like, well, you'd like to think it'll be that, but that was, we're definitely going to say that was their biggest mistake of anything they did this offseason without question. But the way you answer that question, which is probably the most likely way that the Saints are going to approach next offseason, then no, I'm not trading Alvin Kamara and Marcus Davenport because you trade those guys before the trade deadline only if you are really going full tank.
The Davenport thing for me, like why I bring him up as a possibility is I think you know what he's going to require to sign him. And if you've decided probably today we're not paying this, like I think last year around this time, they probably already knew like, oh, we're not paying Marcus Williams what he's asking for. If you know that number's beyond where you're going to go, I would do it just to get something before you lose them. And that would be the only reason to do that right now. On a scale of 1 to 100, where 1 to 99 are not available, like it seems like everybody else, how angry are you about the quarterback decision? Regardless,
No, 0.
Everybody's at 100, man.
0.
Everybody's at 100.
0 because me and you and Kevin spent about a total of an hour going round and round debating the merits of both guys. It was a valid debate. Like I could have supported either choice pretty easily. Actually, that was our thought exercise that we did last Friday. I was saying the reasons for Jameis, and then Kevin made us flip-flop Tuesday and told me to say the reasons for Dalton. There's obviously valid merit to both decisions. So the anger actually surprised me. Twitter rarely surprises me, but the amount of anger surprised me. But, I mean, obviously either guy has very vocal supporters. I'm sure if they went to Jameis, we would have seen a lot of anger coming from just different Twitter accounts. But I obviously see why they chose Andy Dalton, because you cannot deny, nobody can deny that this offense has made gains in the last 4 weeks during the same 4 weeks that he was the quarterback. Of course, that's not only Andy Dalton related, and they could have made the exact same gains or could continue to make the exact same gains with a healthy Jameis Winston. And obviously, Andy Dalton is not perfect. His turnovers were an embarrassment the other night. Like that's going to probably be the defining moment of this season. 2 pick sixes before halftime. But when Dennis Allen said, "I don't want to upset the apple cart," I believe that he doesn't want to upset the apple cart. There is one thing that has actually improved over the last 4 weeks. The last thing he wants to do is risk losing those gains that they've made.
My biggest question with it is I just didn't understand why he had to go into it like with such a strong statement. Part of me liked that he made a very strong, convicted decision. He knew what he wanted to do. He was backing his guy. He didn't health status, all that stuff was aside. Like, regardless if everybody was right, he was going with Andy Dalton. He made a decision. He was rolling with them. And that was it. And there was a piece of me when it happened, I was like, man, I like this. Like, you want your leader to make strong decisions. You want him to know where he's going. The other part of me was Jameis is still on the injury report. You could have just went one more week and you didn't have to make a strong decision. If Andy Dalton crashes and burns this week, it's not on you, really. It's just kind of, all right, well, we're going back to Jameis, and nobody had to really be the wiser. I don't know. I guess when you're 2-5, these are the things that you kind of get nitpicked on, and it's probably not fair to nitpick somebody on any of that stuff. So as far as him becoming the CEO of this team, and this is my operation, I guess I'm going to side with, I liked what he did, but I'm skeptical about how the whole season's going to play out. If we're 3 weeks from now and Dalton has 2 bad games in a row and they go back to Jameis, I wouldn't be surprised by that outcome at all. But on the flip side of it, if they had just went back to Jameis this week, 3 weeks from now, I wouldn't have been shocked if they were going back to Dalton. I mean, I just kind of feel like it's just kind of very similar. They're both good at some things. They're both bad at some things. This wasn't, I think if you ran a simulation from this point forward, 100 games with Dalton, 100 games with Jameis, I think the record's probably pretty close in the end.
Neither one affects. Well, I take it back. I was going to say neither one affects my record prediction for this team or even who would win this week. But if they were bringing Jameis back after
Dalton
4 or 5 weeks off, it might make me feel less confident that they could win this week, because I think there would be a rust element to shake off. But as for why he had to make a declarative statement on Wednesday, I felt like he had to. I mean, not that he had to, but I felt like this week felt like declaration week. I mean, when Jameis came back as the emergency third quarterback 2 weeks ago, and then he came back as the backup last week, and then he was on the injury report as a full participant Wednesday. I feel like we would have been sitting here saying, why do they keep leaning on the injury as their excuse? He's a full participant in practice every day. Obviously, he's healthy enough to play. He should just announce they're going with Dalton, and he did. But you're right, especially since you reported the information that Winston's been dealing with even more injuries than we realized. So we
knew. We've been talking about the foot. We just didn't have
what
a
it
title
specifically
on
was.
Yeah.
So Jameis Winston is probably 85% healthy right now, and or 90% or 75%. I don't know what it is, but Dennis Allen could obviously say, "I'm making this decision because I'm going to stick with Andy Dalton until I know that Jameis Winston is 100% healthy." He could have said that and gotten away with that too, but he made it clear that they're making he didn't shy away from the decision he actually made, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're going to see as far as how DA's perceived publicly, like now this is on him too.
Yeah.
So, the thing is, though, is I don't think the front office here is swayed by public opinion at all. So anything can happen out there, and people can be in the streets screaming, and like they don't care. They do what they do. They're comfortable with what they do, and over time, that's generally been the right approach. And usually, good franchises are patient. Steelers, a lot of teams that have had a lot of success that are generally usually pretty good. They do have those qualities, but we're gonna see with this one, man. It's they got to win games. I think now Dalton has to succeed, and if he doesn't, it is people are gonna bring that up. And I don't know how much that matters. I think 6 months from now or whatever it is, when the draft is, free agency starts, they're looking for a quarterback either way. I mean, DA's still gonna be the head coach. I would be absolutely shocked if he wasn't. I don't think you want a team, as bad as people want someone to get fired. You're never gonna hire anyone if you fire your head coach 7 weeks into the season because Twitter's bad. Like, who's gonna take that job if it's being decided by John 74327, like who the head coach of the Saints is? You're never gonna get a good coach. So they're gonna go through this season unless there's a Urban Meyer level circus. Like he's the coach next year. They're looking for a quarterback, and could be Andy Dalton. They could be back on Jameis. But I think what this does tell us is that idea of, Jameis could come in and be the next franchise quarterback he could develop. The Saints are telling us they don't believe that. Now, does he get another chance and prove them wrong? Maybe. It's absolutely possible. But they're telling us right now, between Deshaun and this, that they don't see that. So to me, that means they are looking for another quarterback, and the idea of this upside and the hope, like that's over. Like they see Jameis, this is who he is and this is who he's going to be. And, right now they're going with the other guy.
Yeah, as far as Dennis Allen's shelf life, I mean, there's still a lot of season to play out. I mean, if they only win one more game the rest of the year, if they do decide to go with we're completely blowing up the roster, those are wild card factors that could lead them to being like, we screwed up by keeping Sean's entire coaching staff, and now we realize we need a full reset. I mean, the same ownership made a decision to move on from, was it Alvin Gentry to Willie Green, or am I forgetting?
Van Gundy.
Van Gundy. That was a 1-year experiment, and they were like, we chose the wrong path. We're resetting a path now. So it's not impossible. And I will say, this patience, in case people are scared, oh man, they're too nice to fire a coach. I think I agree with you. I would bet a good bit of money on Dennis Allen being the coach heading into next year, but I don't think that shelf life lands beyond 2 years. I mean, if these are the results, I don't think he's the coach in 2024. But obviously, it's way too early to know what this team looks like 3 months from now, and certainly 15 months from now.
Yeah, I just think that there's probably a practicality element to this. I think the first thing would be probably, all right, you got to get new coordinators. Like let's do this with new coordinators and see. Like if it ends in a very bad place and they aren't winning enough games. But like we've said before, if barring losing the entire locker room, and there is a possibility where that happens, but I think they're probably successful enough to where guys stay kind of bought in a little bit. And I think he goes in the next year and you kind of see where you're at from there. I think that Mickey Loomis is a very practical person. And nobody wants to hear who's injured. Mike Thomas is injured. Jarvis Landry's injured. Paulson Adebo was injured. Marshawn Lattimore was injured. PJ Williams. Marcus May was out at one point. Like the starting quarterback, who is no longer the starting quarterback.
Alvin missed a game that they lost by 2 points.
So I think that Andrews Pete, the list goes on. Like I think that they're practical enough to look at these things and be like, all right, like this was tough for him. Like it's probably not a fair evaluation, but yeah, it goes on from here. And if he turns it around, we've talked about this. So, but yeah, I think there is definitely a possibility. I think they would react if it was necessary. I just think that it isn't going to be like on a whimsy, well, let's fire a DA today. Like they aren't gonna come to it like that.
Yeah. Well, and your injury point, I mean, we have made this before, and I think we're beyond using it as an excuse, because we are definitely in the we have to evaluate this coaching staff mode. But the greatest point of all is all these same people that are mad and want to fire DA are probably the same people who every time we list the inactives before the game are like, I'm not even going to watch today. They obviously can't win this game. And then when they lose it, they're mad. And it's like, so which is it?
Speaking of injuries, what do you do with Alante when everybody's back? Are you playing him? Are you starting him still on the outside? You looking at him inside? What are you doing?
I get to cheat and the Saints get to cheat. He's going to start outside this week against the Raiders and Devontae Adams, because he's going to start on one side and Paulson Adebo is going to start on the other side.
If he succeeds.
So, if he succeeds more than Paulson Adebo succeeds, then he beats out Paulson Adebo.
Let's make it hard. What if it looks pretty similar? What are you doing?
Then you've saved the season. That's great. Yeah, I mean, if it's exactly even, tie goes to Alante Taylor.
I think if they both look good, you're in a good spot. I try Alante inside, see what happens.
Alante inside.
Yeah, I think you try him inside. Paulson definitely cannot play inside. He doesn't move well enough. I think Alante does. I would give him a shot on the inside.
Do you recall ever seeing them even line him up for one snap on the inside this offseason?
He did in training camp. And then actually when the season started, they told him to start learning it a
Yeah.
little bit after they traded CJ. He thought that was going to be his original opportunity.
Yeah.
So they do see him with that
Yeah.
flexibility. And look, he has that skill set too. When he came in, everybody was like, "Oh, could he
Well,
be
yeah,
could he be a
exactly.
safety?" So I mean, I think he does some things at that spot. And then look, just stupid X factor things. Like he kind of is in the mold of like some of the other guys they've had in that position as far as like the attitude and the way they play, the grittiness. I think he would embrace run blitzing, blitzing quarterbacks, doing some of that dirty work that they like in the slot. I think
Well,
long term, if everything works out, I
DA
think
was
that's where they
so
would like him.
animated in pointing to how much he liked his toughness and his competitiveness, that he's definitely going to stay on the field. He's going to have to lose his opportunity to be on the field for sure.
Oh,
He
yeah.
will be on the field unless all of a sudden he looks sort of like a Debo randomly started looking in weeks 2 and 3 or whatever it was this season.
Yeah, and I think after people get a chance to watch him, I mean, so the success last week doesn't guarantee success this week. He's no longer like an unknown commodity. People are studying him and finding out what he does well, what he doesn't do well, and we'll see how he holds up through that. But the initial exposure, really, really good, especially for a player that they thought had to develop a little bit for him to go out there and be able to cover DeAndre Hopkins. And D Hop actually went up to him after the game and told him that he liked how he played and he was
Yeah.
impressed with him. So, I mean, he's getting all this, the reassurance. And he talked a lot this offseason about how confidence was an issue for him before the combine, and he kind of figured something out about himself. So getting these reassurances and having these tests passing, having that, a top 5 wide receiver tell you played well. I think these are all very good things for him. And yeah, we'll see. But all of them playing well, getting him in the slot, I think would be best case scenario. But look, if he has the most upside on the outside, cornerbacks are worth so much more. So we'll see. But I mean, if they actually had to make a decision, that's a very good place to be.
You just said, speaking of injuries, and I know what I thought you were going to say, and so I'm sure the entire listening audience thought that was going to lead to a Michael Thomas question. Where are we at with Michael Thomas?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, isn't it?
Look, let me go on a little thing. Like I said this on another podcast. There are just situations we are knocking on doors, we're calling phone numbers, we're trying to figure out every single thing we can. And you hear things, but nothing enough to where, there's a level
You
of
can't report it as
information.
a fact.
Level of information where you have to, report things. And he is a guy that is just very hard to get information on. And a lot of that stuff flows from the player himself. If it is a closed off player who doesn't want people to know anything about him, people are usually like, look, Mike's going to be pissed if I say something like, I'm not saying anything. And that's just the reality of the situation. There was a whole entire offseason where the whole entire coaching staff, the front office, all the teammates, they were unaware of what Mike Thomas was doing with his rehab. It's hard to know what's going on with Mike. So that's all I'm saying. Like if Sean Payton can't get an answer, it's hard for us to get an answer.
I would say this because we both have talked to people. I feel pretty comfortable that we can rule out he's demanding a trade.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't want to be part of this team kind of stuff. I've gotten no whispers of that, even from anywhere. I think it's probably a lot more about how he feels, how his camp feels, how the team feels about where he is in injury recovery and how healthy he needs to be back on the field. Because obviously it's a very sensitive area where, this team openly had some squabbles in the past. And Mike made it very clear that doctors don't all have right opinions. So I have a feeling it is a all about how everyone feels the health of his ankle is or foot is and when he can come back. I don't think he is quitting on this team. I don't think I definitely can rule out he refuses to play with Andy Dalton and will only come back when Jameis Winston comes back.
He was on Instagram liking posts saying that Andy was the starter going forward. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think he was upset about that.
And he is there. I mean, we don't see him. That's another one. Has he flown back to L.A. and he's not around the team? We don't see him around a lot. I haven't seen him in the locker room a lot, but he was on the field the other day. He is around. He is doing his treatment here. He was so at least the major conspiracy theories, I think we can rule some of those out.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the reality of the situation is that Mike's going to decide when Mike feels good enough to play. And people that you ask what's going on with Mike, I mean, it's kind of people that are close enough to know. Generally, the answers are like, we'll see. Like, we'll see how he feels. I think Mike just needs to feel good. And when he feels good, he'll be back on the field. Mike's been through a lot injury-wise. I mean, I will say this about him. He is somebody in despite what's happened the last couple of years, I look at Mike Thomas and he is still somebody that I think loves to play football. He loves to practice.
Wants to be great.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any element of Mike's done playing football. He's unhappy. He's quit. No. I think Mike is also somebody that really cares about how he's perceived, and I think he knows what it looks like when people say, "Oh, this guy doesn't want to play. He's injury prone." All that. He doesn't want to be labeled that. Like Mike actually cares. He's not somebody that I think is. I think he's driven by dollars because dollars says where you stand in the league, and that's how you're ranked. It's oh, this guy makes this much because he's the best. I think Mike Thomas just wants to be the best football player, and I still believe that to be true with everything. I just think that he has been through a lot to a point
Right.
where he probably wants to feel completely comfortable with his
Well, because
body
he
before he
played
comes on
he
the field.
played through that ankle
Yeah,
injury,
and it backfired.
and he did it twice, and we know that was something that he was very sensitive about because he would, when he was squabbling with the team, he was liking those posts saying he played hurt for this team, and now they're blaming him for being hurt.
Look at how we got to
that's
get
how
our
he
Mike
felt.
Thomas insight. It's like he
Yeah,
liked this.
the post he liked, but so yeah, but because it could reflect bad if he's like, oh, when he feels like he's healthy enough to play, well, other guys play hurt or whatever. This has become his livelihood. He lost years of his career because of a decision to play through injuries, or at least that's how he feels. So I understand. And then going back to a lot of people are upset. Well, why didn't the team put him on IR? I do think this was the type of injury, and we did hear this early on that when we talked to sources, there was optimism that he could be back from this type of injury within 2 or 3 weeks potentially. But there are a lot of injuries that have 3-week to 6-week variants or whatever. So with the information the Saints had at the time, I don't think it was an obvious choice to put him on IR. I know in retrospect they wish they had put him on IR, but Dennis Allen did say if there was a chance we were going to get him back in 3 weeks, we weren't going to automatically sideline him for 4 because he's a good enough player that I want that week.
Yeah, and look, there's multiple guys that are inactive. Like,
Yeah.
one of the talking points is like, why didn't they put him on IR? They could have brought somebody up productive that could have replaced him. There are multiple guys that are inactive every single week that have no chance of playing. Mike being on the roster with the possibility that you don't have to lose him for 4 weeks or whatever. He's just one of those guys that's not going to play. Like, he's not stopping somebody else from playing. Now, if you have 6 guys and now Mike's your 7th.
Which actually happened for a week. Yeah. So
yeah.
At the time they did not have 6 injured players, but 2 weeks later they did.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not really, and then you can elevate guys from the practice squad as well. So he is not taking anybody's spot. And the last thing I'll say on this, and I don't want this to sound like Nick and Mike defend Mike Thomas, but
but just trying to the people who really are like, why aren't you guys asking what's going on with Mike Thomas? We are, and we're trying to unload the notebook here on everything we know about the situation.
I spent like 4 hours yesterday, trying to find answers on Mike Thomas. I promise you, and I hope I have enough track record, and Mike has enough track record that you guys know that we're trying our best to tell you everything we possibly can about the team. I report stuff that I regret reporting later due to reaction or just but it's just all right, people want to know, so I'm going to tell them. I put a lot of pride in that, and hopefully that shows. This is a situation, trying as hard as possible. I would take it as a major victory if I knew. But look, the last thing I'll say about Mike is that there are very, very privately, people you look at or you talk about, and you're like, man, I don't know if this guy he it probably doesn't bother him that he's not playing or something like that. Mike has never, ever, ever, ever been one of those guys that I would even entertain if someone brought it up to me, I'd be like, come on, man, this dude is not that at all. But sure, other people that you hear it and it's like, I don't know, maybe does he play football just because he's good at it? I don't think Mike's one of those guys. No. I think he needs to play football.
He wants to be he's said it, and everyone has said it about him. He's probably the most intense competitor I've ever. Him and Drew might be 1 and 2, to be honest. And I will say a lot of people have always compared him to Darren Sproles. I didn't ever get that vibe from Darren Sproles talking to him in the locker room, but people will always say put Darren Sproles on that short list too, which I think is really interesting. But of the most intense competitors, the quote unquote every practice rep is the Super Bowl type of guys. Mike's in that category. So
last one to win.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that if you didn't ask me that. Unfortunately, I have enough confidence in this team to be the exact same team we've seen the last 3 weeks. I bet they're leading the Raiders by 2 scores at some point in this game in the first half. I feel like they'll have the right energy, the right approach, the right game planning to go ahead like they went ahead of Cincinnati and Arizona. But I if I had to make a prediction on the game, I'd pick the Raiders to win because I don't know that the Saints can, especially since they haven't gotten these guys back from injury, and we're still gonna be looking at some of the players in the secondary that have been repeat offenders. I don't know that they're gonna need some things to go their way to do it for 60 full minutes, and I need to see it before I believe it. I can't believe they're gonna lose every game they play. I think they're the kinda team that should go 2 and 3 over a 5-game span, so maybe it evens out. Maybe they, God forbid, get it 2 takeaways in this game and no giveaways. Wouldn't that be something to see that actually happen? But I can't predict them to win this game.
I felt good about what I felt in the locker room this week. I'm gonna believe in that. I'm gonna pick them to win. I think they
Alright.
figure it out. I think they get on the other side of some of this stuff. And my only reason is that I just felt like there was a better vibe around the team this week, and I don't know. I guess that's what we're looking for at this point.
Yeah.
Because at some point they got to stop beating themselves, and maybe this is a week, but we'll see. Uh, Appreciate you guys listening to this. If you are not signed up to NewOrleans.Football, please fix that. NewOrleans.Football/subscribe. We exist on your support. So if you like the podcast and you are not supporting the site, do it. You get an extra podcast every week, all of our writing, analysis, all that stuff. And it helps us do what we do. For all of your coverage, keep it locked. And we will be back after the game, podcast form, members only. You got to be signed up to the site to get that. And we'll see if they actually figure out how to stop the bleeding this week. We're out.